Hello, everyone. I'll give you a moment to connect to sound. Hello, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 1142nd New Social Environment. I'm Chloe, Director of Programs here at the Rail, and I have the extreme privilege to be your MC today for a conversation featuring Elisabeth Subrin and Jill H. Casid. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. Since 1995, Elisabeth Subrin's critically acclaimed films and video installations have sought to excavate the fissures and erasures in dominant histories through an intersectional feminist lens. Known for her use of reenactment, beginning with her widely recognized 1997 film Shulie, solo presentations of her work have been included at MoMA, the Venice Biennale, ICA Philadelphia, ICA London, and many others. Her film Maria Schneider, 1983, premiered at Cannes, receiving a 2023 César, a Fulbright, Guggenheim, and Sundance Fellow. She is a professor of film and media art at Temple University and lives in Brooklyn. And our host today, Jill H. Casid, holds the appointment of Professor of Visual Studies in the departments of Art History and Gender and Women's Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Casid is bringing to completion Doing Things with Being Undone in the Necrocene, the first part of a two-book project on form at the edges of life. Casid is the author of Sewing Empire, Landscape and Colonization, Scenes of Projection, Recasting the Enlightenment Subject, which is in Spanish translation, and the co-edited collection Art History in the Wake of the Global Turn. Casid's artwork has been exhibited nationally and internationally around the world. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jill to get us started.
Thank you so much, Chloe, and thank you. This is an extraordinary Zoom room. I'm seeing so many friends, co-conspirators, interlocutors, so many I admire and cherish and hold close. So in this moment of the world on fire, I'd like to begin with a personal acknowledgement. I am the queer descendant of Jewish refugees from Germany and what's now Belarus and Ukraine. My great-grandmother, after whom I was named, was taken on the first transport of Jews out of the Baden region to the Gurs concentration camp in southern France, and on the border with Spain. As the descendant of dispossessed Jews, many of whom didn't survive, I refuse the instrumentalized theft of my grief and losses and the tactical weaponization of Holocaust memory more generally as fuel for the Israeli state's genocidal and voracious war machine. I condemn the US bankrolling of this extermination, the assaults on artistic, academic, and journalistic freedom, and the double standards with regard to boycotts and calls for divestments and sanctions. In the names of my ancestors and my own, I'm with Palestine still, and not just calling for a ceasefire, but also aiming to dismantle the genocidal apartheid regime of our time, and doing so as what I keep insisting is a praxis of love. I also recognize that I'm joining you via Zoom. I want to thank my friend Qiming Yang for the acknowledgement that Zoom isn't outside settler colonial occupation. Let's remember that virtual space too has a material basis and participates in the ongoing legacies of land theft. Without material consideration of land back, the right of return, reparations, and abolition of the carceral state and colonial occupation, acknowledgement is, of course, never enough. Let's then not just acknowledge, but also hold open the possible portal that holding this conversation presents as a chance to send the reverberations of a never again for anyone, and a transversal no to US imperial funding of the Israeli state's war machine, no to the carceral state, no to selective solidarity, no to white supremacy and Euro-exceptionalism, and no to the defunding of structures of care and support that make the fires consuming Los Angeles only the most recent in a now line from New York to Katrina to Gaza of a natural and preventable disaster, ecocide. And to make this no a channel for a binding bond among the uncounted and the condition of a worldlessness that in my own work I've been calling the necrocene, to bring close a reckoning with the catastrophe that recurs and that has already occurred. And yet within this worldlessness, a palpable sense that there's still ways of doing things with being undone to insist on the supports for livable life for Palestinian, Black, Brown, Indigenous, migrant, refugee, queer, and trans in the extended sense life. So with that personal acknowledgement, I want to turn to setting up our conversation. It's an honor to be in a conversation with the ever-brilliant artist and filmmaker Elisabeth Subrin, whose particular genius in crossing the genres of documentary, narrative, and experimental filmmaking takes what might be described as the forms of queer and transfeminist openings of and drags on history and the archive with devices of speculative biography, repetition, and especially, as we'll explore in our conversation today, her particular approach to reenactment. Reenactment as not as a way to possess the past, but a way to see and hear the otherwise missed, foreclosed, misapprehended through the vehicle of not heroines, but complex, moving, difficult, even damaged figures of compelling force. From feminist writer Shulie Firestone as an art student and not yet the author of The Dialectic of Sex in her film Shulie, to the late French actress Maria Schneider, the reenactment of whose volatile 1983 interview in which Schneider is pushed but refuses to talk about her performance, but what we could also absolutely insist and understand as a rape. Her performance at 19 in Bernardo Bertolucci's 1972 The Last Tango in Paris, which is at the center of the new iteration of the multi-channel video and sound installation in the listening takes, and the premiere of the new film on which we're going to focus, Manal Issa 2024, shot on location in Beirut, Lebanon last summer. These are modes of reenactment that have us reckon with the discomfiting of not just our legacies, but our present, with the not yet heard and not yet metabolized of a transfeminism, a trans-leading feminism that's transnational, trans-affirmative, transversal, and making connections across time, space, and forms of embodiment, including forms of embodiment beyond the policed binary. I should add quickly that since the riveting first time that I saw Elisabeth's Shulie at the ICA in Boston in 1998, a film that the British Film Institute has listed in 2012 and 2022 as an international critics pick for the greatest film of all time, I've admired Elisabeth's ways of remaking what in my own work I understand as the scene of projection as an apparatus that produces its subject, conventionally by a refusal of multiple selves, a displacement often violent of the not me or not us. In contrast, the cinema Elisabeth remakes includes us in the making of a plural, more expansive, generous, non-fascist subject, and us of multiplicity and becoming. So this is a work and a mode of working that we can understand as a mode of travel, a sensory experience, a space of acoustic transport. As Elisabeth insists in her work, this remaking of a more generous subject may be done by a particular kind of even sonic transport. So with that, I am wanting to, Elisabeth, in a way, if you would allow me to reenact one of your articulations of the ways that you work with actresses in returning to, and the figure that we have on the screen is the icon Maria Schneider. You've written how and articulated how on the red carpet at Cannes in 2018, Manal Issa, who you have in the listening takes performing Maria, born in Lebanon, held a handwritten sign over her head that said, "Stop the attack on Gaza," to highlight the devastating and continuous destruction of Palestinians' lives. And then at the 2020 César Awards, Ayessa Maiga, who was born in Senegal, delivered, as you put it, a very controversial and courageous condemnation of the French film industry for their frank racism. Isabel Sandoval from the Philippines is breaking new ground as a celebrated trans director and is vocal about the limitations of transgender representation in the media, as well as condemning violence against Asian communities. And you've insisted that you, as you put it, want to expand the as you put it, Maria's critique to create a more dimensional and diverse examination of what actresses and by extension most women experience daily. And so with that setup, we're focusing on the listening takes and doing so by taking listening as our focus today and as our method and means. We'll be showing slide documentation as we have here that includes key source material. We'll also be showing slide documentation of the exhibition. Currently at participant, the run has been extended, and you'll see in the notes that we urge you to of course, listen today, but also go to hear the exhibition at participant. And we'll be punctuating therefore, our conversation with 4 clips to make this conversation a deep listening session. So, Elisabeth, I know you want to set up the listening takes for us to begin to go into exercise this method that you understand is so central.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much, Jill, for your beautiful introduction, for inviting me to do this talk. Thank you to the Brooklyn Rail, who so really generously and quickly, incredible, well operated machine pulled this together during the time of this exhibition. And so I'm really happy to be here and happy to see everyone who's on the Zoom. So I propose that we just very quickly, before I answer Jill's brilliant questions, for people who haven't seen the piece, which presumably you would only see if you're in New York. So if you haven't seen it, I hope you come. It's an installation that is based on my mining or discovering an interview with the late French actress Maria Schneider. These slides that you've seen right here, I find that you have to be kind of over 40 to know who Maria Schneider is. But if you're here and you don't, she co-starred at 19 years old as an unknown actress from a pretty complex and difficult childhood across from Marlon Brando in what became a very famous, legendary, provocative, problematic, X-rated film called Last Tango in Paris. And to make a long story short, there was a non-consensual act of sexual violence on the set. You can see that on the right side, these are what's called lobby cards that I found in the archives of the Cinémathèque Française, where there was no doubt that there was a rape scene in the film, but there was no understanding that that rape scene and the performance and actions of it were non-consensual. And for many, many years, Maria Schneider, who lived until 2011, was described as her life having been ruined. We can look at the next slide. Ruined by this film and the devastation, both of what happened on set that she didn't talk about, but more because she was skyrocketed as a sex symbol. She was harassed for all her life because of the very, very explicit sex scene in the film, and fetishized, trivialized, exploited. And what people don't really know more about is the next slide, which is that she actually pulled herself out of a lot of drug, mental health, trauma, struggles, and had a vibrant life and career where she was in many, many films, but in a profoundly uncompromised way, where she basically both used her body and her choices as roles to literally not be sexually objectified by the camera, which is extraordinarily challenging thing to do. And in all my research, really unprecedented amongst her peers, any generation before her, and at least one generation after her, where there's really no such thing as a leading femme actress who does not find herself, at least when she's young, as an object. So what you're seeing on the bottom slide is from archives and other documents of lesser known films, lesser known images. And then I included, because I adore her favorite fashion portrait, which is by Nan Golden, that she did for Japanese Vogue on the lower left. So that's kind of the setup for Maria Schneider. In all my research, thank you, I found this tidbit of archival interview, which had not been seen a lot, of her doing an interview 11 years later after Last Tango in Paris. It's 7 minutes long. It felt very basic in a lot of ways. She's just at a cafe answering questions to do advance of unknown, like a film we'll never remember anymore. But at the end of it, she's kind of hijacked and asked to talk about Last Tango in Paris instead. And what I decided to do is to remake this film. And what I guess I'll just say, because I think it's a good preface for, and you can see right there, the reenactment performance by Manal Issa, which we'll show you a clip of. But what I want to just say before we look at a clip is that whenever I make work, just in terms of process, I really don't have any tactical plans. Like this, just like the film Shulie, this piece of archival film footage, in some ways it's incredibly unremarkable. And I just work from a place of like, there's something there, there's something going on, and then just watching and watching and watching it and trying to figure out why I care. And the impulse to do something with it is really first, very unintellectual. And then the process of actually making it is a much more intense practice of self-interrogation and questioning and setting up problems for me to solve. So at the time I found this footage and the instinct to reenact it, the only thing that really affirmed my sense that there was something there and the not there was when I showed my girlfriend it and we got to the clip that we are about to see. She said something that made me really trust my instinct about subtext. So why don't we look at the first clip, which is Manal Issa responding to one of the second to last question in this interview.
Il y a un ordre de barbarie? Oui, je crois. Alors, est-ce que tu es d'accord finalement si on illustre ce CV avec un extrait du dernier tango? Non. Non, je préfère pas. Professeur Porter, tout ce que tu veux. Tango, bon, je te dis, ça va ressortir et déjà ça va être assez dur. Non. On va parler de tango. Tu n'es pas capable de faire la part de la force du film et de ce que tu as vécu toi. C'est un film, c'est tout, je veux dire, quoi. Parce que c'est un début, c'est pas vraiment un début. Parce que j'avais fait des choses avant, j'aurais fait des choses de toute façon. Je veux pas toujours, on me rattache toujours à ça. Partout, j'ai le tango avec moi, bon, basta. Et d'autre part, je préfère parler de Professeur Porter, qui est un film plus près de moi, si on veut parler de moi, pas de celui. C'est bien sur le plateau, pendant un tournage? Et si j'aimais pas, je ferais autre chose.
So, uh, that is the reenactment of the original film. Manal is doing literally frame by frame, eye motion by eye motion, line by line reenactment of the original. And as I was working with this and thinking about reenacting it, I realized that I actually couldn't just use Manal or any one actress. I needed to have more actresses. So if you go back to the slide before, you'll see that ultimately I cast 3 actresses to play Maria Schneider, and we shot over the course of 3 days, each of them on a set doing the same performance. And with Issa Mega, who's in the center, and Isabel Sandoval, in rehearsals, I asked them to consider the question in this interview, what are the lines, what are the fewest words you could change to make it true to your own experience? Most of the interview is asking her questions about being an actress, like, what is it like for you to be an actress? Who's like the most famous person, actor you've ever liked? Do you like that? What happens when you get offered a role? What did you want to do when you were little? And then, uh, you know, can you not separate your experience of the film from the brilliance of it? And I asked them what they would change, and the words were staggeringly few. But what I invited them to do in rehearsals is to kind of modulate between kind of 3 modalities and like 3 tracks. One is them performing the role of Maria Schneider. One of them is performing the role in terms of their own experience as an actress, as themselves, and one is responding to their feelings about Maria. So it's a kind of complex layering. So there's both the kind of 3 of the 3 actresses bringing different experiences as a filmmaker, as a femme, generationally, to the nationally, et cetera, to the film. And then there's also a kind of shift sonically that we do throughout the film and visually. And then in the installation, which I can show in the next shot, spatially and sonically, how we organize space, time, and experience. So that's kind of my best ability to kind of consolidate the relationship. The film also exists as a single channel film and then as this installation. In the installation, you walk through and you see these 3 actresses performing the role on one on each screen. While the first actress, Manal, is doing her 7-minute interview, you see 7-minute long takes of the other 2 actresses. I interpret what they're doing to be listening, inhabiting, witnessing, but they're long takes of them not speaking and present in the space. And then Issa speaks, Manal and Isabel listen or code for whatever. And then Isabel speaks, and then all 3 of them speak at the same time. So what I wanted to show you in lieu of what's a 30-minute cycle is the same clip or the same section of the interview. Oh, and here are the backsides, which I can talk about a little later, of the installation. There are these beautiful reflections on the backsides of the screens. I think there's one more detail.
Well, and just to emphasize that we're looking at the installation as it is right now at
Yes,
Participant
at
Inc.
Participant. So to just set up kind of the questions about sound, we're going to show you a clip of all the three of them speaking at the same time, which has been edited from the film rather than in the gallery, so you can hear their voices more clearly and precisely. And I should say that on this one does not have the subtitles, and it also doesn't have the sound design, so you're only hearing their voices, which I really love because I think it'll bring up other questions about the work. So what you saw is Manal asking this, being interviewed by this question about tango. Now you're going to hear all three of them answering the same question.
I performed. I wanted to.
Quand t'étais petite, tu voulais faire du cinéma?
I wanted to act
Dessiner.
and become a
Quand t'étais
director.
petite, tu voulais faire du cinéma?
Je voulais dessiner.
Je dessinais.
Devenir
Je
peintre.
voulais,
Il destino.
je voulais dessiner, je voulais devenir peintre.
Destino.
Il destino.
Is there an organ player?
Yes, I believe so.
Il y a un ordre
Il
de
y a un ordre de
barbarie.
barbarie.
Oui, je crois. Oui, je crois. So, do you finally agree if we illustrate this? Alors, est-ce que tu es d'accord finalement si on illustre ce CV avec un extrait du dernier tango?
Non.
Non. Non. Je préfère
Professeur reporter, tout ce que tu veux.
Professeur porteur, tout ce que
Mais
tu
le
veux.
tango, je te dis,
Tango,
il va peut-être
oui.
ressortir.
Je te dis,
Déjà, ça va
Come
être
out again.
sortir et
assez
déjà,
dur.
ça va être
It's
assez
already hard
dur.
enough.
Non, je
No.
veux plus parler de tango.
No, I don't want to talk about tango.
Tu n'es pas capable de faire la part de la force du film et de ce que tu as vécu toi. You're not able to distinguish between the force of the film and what you experience yourself. Tu n'es pas capable de faire la part de la force du film et de ce que tu as vécu toi.
It's a film in which I was raped. I wasn't told that was going to happen. The rape was not written in the script. Nowhere.
Parce que j'avais fait des choses avant.
I didn't know about
J'avais
it.
fait des choses de toute façon. Je peux pas toujours. On me rattache
What you
toujours.
see
Qui est un film plus près de moi.
Partout, j'ai le tango avec moi.
are my real tears,
Basta.
real screams.
Donc, si on veut
D'autre
parler de
part,
moi,
je
on parle
préfère
de
parler de
celui-là.
Humiliation.
Professeur Porter, qui est un film plus près de moi, si on veut parler de moi, pas de celui-là.
Now people always connect me to that everywhere. Tango's always with me. Would you be able to distinguish what you experience yourself from the force of the film? If you must talk about tango, we should talk about that.
Do you feel happy being on set and shooting films? T'es bien sur le plateau pendant un tournage?
Si j'aimais pas, je ferais autre chose. C'est bon, on a tout?
So, Elizabeth, thank you so much for setting that up. And I am really hoping that we can talk about how you understand and use listening as a method. And I would really love it if you would speak to what kind of deep listening you're choreographing here and how it's working now in this difficult political interval, particularly in In the last version, the one where we hear Isabel Sandoval speaking in English, we hear said what's only gestured to or subtext in the other reenactments. This gesture to what's been rendered otherwise unspeakable in a climate in which, yes, there's been Me Too, for example, in a US context, but it's still so difficult to be able to speak to, as you put it, the non-consensual, but what we could also say is what some have argued is a rape culture.
Yes, I've loved thinking about these questions about listening that you've proposed. I think before I get into the specifics of Maria's kind of resurgent relevance and what it means, especially in relationship to listening, I just wanted to share that when I was thinking about listening earlier today, I realized that there's something about listening that's such a given that it's something we do if we are hearing abled without labor. Whereas it's also a privilege to be able to listen. But I think it's something that we, particularly in the United States, do not do well. We're not a culture of listeners. And I I was thinking about how when you're shooting on film, directors are often really focused on the performance of an actor. And it took me a while as a director to realize that the reaction shot, or technically the listening shot, was really where all the information was, that listening is about reception. And in terms of your question, when I was thinking about what is deep listening, to me, deep listening is embodied listening. It's listening that is felt through the body, felt in the heart, felt deeply, felt in its full dimensions, and that we often talk about holding space right now. And I think that in a way you could say in the installation that that is what the other two actresses at any point are doing for the one speaking. But if you walk through the space, especially with this nine speaker design, so that wherever you are hearing very intimately who's speaking, even if you're standing in the back by Isabel and hearing Manal speak. So the intimacy of their voices stays close to the screens. And I think it's more than holding space. I think it's almost like suffusing the space with voice, with other people's voice. So that to me, it's a really a profound act of empathy to really listen. And yeah, I guess I'll start there, that to me is one of the things that's the most powerful about the film, and then, or the installation. And then also the idea in terms of like layering voices, that we are able to move through multiple kind of historical and interpersonal subjectivities at the same time, so that the three of their experiences speaking, we as viewers are experiencing simultaneously as these layers, so that in terms of another one of my obsessions, which is the biographical subject, or almost the impossibility of a biographical subject, is that we are experiencing Maria across time, across identities, across voices, kind of, as you talked about, in a kind of intersectional trans feminist way that to me feels much fuller to how one ultimately can describe a person. So I kind of just spoke in a circular way, describing the project and a question of listening. I hope that was.
No. That of course, what's condensed in what are we've just listen to short clips, but short clips of work that's on a loop, but we could understand as highly condensed. There's an aspect of how it's working that is intimately connecting this distinction that you're making really powerfully between hearing and listening being an ethical act and a hard one, because you're really asking us to attend to what's indirectly stated, but is also happening in between the screens. And I was wondering, Chloe, if we could look at the installation shots at participant, that people have talked about this moment right before the inauguration of convicted felon as a political interval. And in this political interval, there's something one could argue is especially poignant about what's happening in the spacing or interval between these screens. And I think there's a lot of question and a lot of pressure right now on what might make us into some kind of trans feminist, trans leading feminist, some form of queer trans feminist connection, or some way of using those terms to describe a collective that many of us feel maybe unsure as to whether that's really here. And that question of the really here relates, I think, very much to this possibility that comes from an act, and as you describe it, ethical act of listening, as opposed to just the hearing privilege. So I was wondering if you could also speak to the decision to work in this way in the space. I know that we are touching on the relationship, and not just touching on, but really wanting to speak to the relationship between what you've done technically and what you're choreographing ethically and politically. Could you tell us a little bit about how you've spatialized the sound?
Absolutely. It was really an incredible learning experience and an incredible kind of discovery of a space where I could explore these ideas about cross historical portraiture and multiplicities through sound in a way that I had never done so immersively. And I'm indebted to the mixer who insisted that when we mix the sound for the 3-channel version that you see here, that we do it in a recording studio, so that when we recorded the sound, we were in a huge space as opposed to a film editing room where we had like 3 flat screens with speakers designated, one for each actress, where some of the cafe sounds were coming out. And then we had 4 speakers, one in each corner of the space, that is building dimensional stereo or 5.1 mix of the sound, so that it spatializes the cafe, so that if you hear, for example, ambulance going by in the soundtrack, it actually is moving through the speakers so that you can hear spatially. The background is also very live. The thing that we discovered when we were there is that we had just had speakers designated to each actress. And as we moved through the space, we were like, this is not, we need more. And so we put speakers facing the actresses too. So as I described before, that you are always with the actress who's speaking while you are, whether they are speaking or whether they are, I'm just saying listening is shorthand, experiencing the speaker. And what I love about that in terms of this kind of 5-speaker design around the screens is that, For example, if we're with Issa and Issa is listening to Isabel, and you're watching Issa in this long kind of Warholian long take, you start feeling like, wait, is it that she's hearing sounds from somewhere else, or is that what she's thinking? Is that what she's feeling? Is that who is who right now? You know what I mean? If we had seen this in a single channel film with like one person speaking and another person on the screen, we would immediately put them together in a kind of literal way, whether it's voiceover or internal thoughts, or someone speaking to you to her. So that really mirrored what happened on the set, where the actresses all told me, I feel like Maria is inside me and I'm inside her. And it was a very intimate set, and everybody was holding space in the sense that they were talking about very upsetting things. And most people on the set, we had an incredibly sophisticated, mostly like major film industry crew, and they all were like, I'm here for my daughter, I'm here for my partner, I'm here for the future. And the sound recorded set, I have never been on a quieter set in my life, because it did kind of feel like a seance there as we were all doing this in a way for Maria, which is code for the experience and the survival of sexual violence. So that's how the sound works. And what I thought was interesting about hearing it without the sound design, which is also literally a sound by sound remixing of the original, meaning we didn't look for in a sound library like, French Cafe, 1983, coffee machines. It's literally copying each sound. But then as we move from Manal to Issa to Isabel, not only spatially does the sound start changing, but the quality of the sound start changing. We start playing with, like the type of phone that rings is different. The sound of the dishes are different. The sound of the people in the cafe are different. So we are playing with sound. I mean, you could see that very literally without the design, that when Isabel at the end starts speaking, Manal and Issa are starting to fade back. And in the sound mix too, from Manal to Issa to Isabel, the mix starts getting pushed further and further back, and the subject, the speaker, comes closer to us.
And this very careful cueing of our attention by going over the same scene so that it's not the same scene, I think is a bridge for us to talk about what you have gone over newly to produce for participants. So those of you in New York, urge you to take advantage of the possibility of experiencing in full, but we've thank you, Elisabeth and Elisabeth's editor, for making a clip for us to have a sense of the new film, Manal Issa, 2024. And before we show that, perhaps you would like to, Elisabeth, say a little something about this intense conversation that you have maintained in this deep relationship that you cultivate with the actresses with whom you work, and always not just actresses, actresses who are insistent on their lives, their political lives, as more important than the acting or limited performance.
Absolutely. And so you're seeing some of the roles that Manal Issa has played in recent years. Probably the biggest one is on the left, the Netflix film, The Swimmers, and her favorite film, The Sea Ahead, on the right. And then if you can see the next slide, you see Manal responding as, in 2018 and then during the last 15 months to the genocide unfolding in Gaza right now. Manal has historically been displaced, both her family and herself, from Lebanon multiple times because of wars, and feels very, very, very deeply about the situation, the Palestinian crisis right now. And after October 7th, we had stayed in touch and we started speaking really weekly. And I think it became a way, to quote Ariana Rines, talking became a way to metabolize from across 5,200 miles our different experiences as a Jewish American in New York and a French Lebanese Shia Muslim in Beirut, how we were handling the devastation of witnessing. Obviously, Manal was not just a witness being in Beirut, what was going on. And I was planning for this exhibition, and I had been reading a statement that Manal and I put together for screenings of Maria, and the collaboration made me think about how beautiful it was to work with her. And I proposed to her that we reenact the film one more time. And but with Manal answering Maria's questions as Manal, because she was the one person who didn't get to change the script at all. And so I proposed, so for really like 7 months, we spoke almost once a week about the questions, which became almost like I recorded like 70 hours of Zoom conversations where I learned about her life. And we tried to distill and distill and distill and then write a script based on her contemporary responses to these questions. So that is what Manal Issa 2024 is. And so we are going to show a clip that I think is her answering, I mentioned this before, a question that Maria's asked about, like, how does it feel to essentially rub up against, more famous people than you in the film industry, which in itself is kind of a gaslighty question. So we're going to look at Manal's response to this question, like, how does it feel to be in the film industry? Do you like meeting people? This is an install. This is how the film is installed right now. So you actually are using headphones to listen to it. And this screen is facing Manal playing Maria. So in a sense, she's facing herself in how it's organized in the gallery. Chloe, could we actually show the second clip, which is, sorry about that. It should be titled something like more impressed, more moved. Thank you.
Yeah, it depends. You meet a lot of people and they could be nice for a while, but that's it. No, this year I was more impressed and more moved by the real, like the Palestinians. And I was impressed by the resistance. They are fighting every day and risking their life for hours. I was moved by the reporters in Gaza who are working and reporting under the bombs to show you what the world doesn't want you to see. You know what I think never a film managed to show. Yeah, and that's what I like.
Thank you.
Well,
So, Oh, go ahead,
Yeah, go
Jill.
ahead, Elizabeth. No, I
So what I was going to say is just that basically the way we organize or the way we made the film, um, we had her answer the same questions with the same timing. Um, and she braids, like we braid into the script some of the language of Maria, but it's Manal's own answer. And because she's such a genius actress, she was able to play with both the cadence and rhythm that she remembered and had so much in her body from probably watching the original like 200 times. Um, but also she brought, the film that we made is about her own experience right now. And in terms of production, I kept trying to get to Beirut and it kept being difficult. And we finally shot it on September 22nd, 2024, with me in Brooklyn remotely and Manal and the crew in Beirut at what you're looking at right here. And the choice for not Manal not to be on the set or to not be in the camera is related to her feelings of about representation, about exploitation, about being censored for her perspectives, being kicked off Instagram, and feeling like um, she can't be herself as an actress, and that she basically, to begin with, will not act until there is a ceasefire. So there's no Manal, which became a whole other kind of conceptual exploration.
thank you for setting that up for us. And I know that I really pushed for us to share this portion of what is such a affecting new reworking of the material that I had really wanted to uh, have you speak to the question of what to do now. Many of us have been asking ourselves what to do, perhaps especially since October 7, but also many of us before, in the time of what we can understand is one of traumatic repetition and return, uprising, pandemic, genocide, recurring fascism, the election, the imminent inauguration of a convicted felon here in the US. And I was really hoping that you would speak directly to this return to Maria Schneider and the making of Manal Issa, to speak to reenactment as a way to begin to apprehend what's perhaps not just been erased, but never metabolized, or even also as a way to puncture our present, to shift how we understand what's possible to do in this moment. And you may have said what you wanted to say already, but I was hoping that you could speak a little bit more to the decision to make this film and to work with participants in doing so, and to take the stand that you're doing and showing it and sharing it in this way.
Yes, my pleasure. I really think that I know this sounds so ridiculous given the safety of Brooklyn, New York, etc. I don't know how I would have gotten through the last year without being in conversation with Manal. The intensity as a Jewish American witnessing what was going on, what felt like only so many protests, actions that one could take. There was something about reaching across to connect that I think was for both of us a real lifeline. And the way the project happened was Leah Gangitano, being the incredible enabler of artists that she is, proposed when we planned for me to do this piece, what are we going to do differently, which resulted initially in a different way of installing the 3-channel piece, but it also just there's something about that space right there that was facing the screens that I was like, okay, I need to do something there. And I had been presenting the films a lot, and since October 7th, when I presented the single channel film, I just was like, I cannot show this thing in good conscience that is so dependent on Manal Issa's performance when she is utterly wrecked by what's going on. And now, we shot the film 3 days after the pager explosions, and if we had shot it 6 hours later, it wouldn't have happened because right after we shot it, when I woke up the next morning, Israel had bombed the entire country, and by the end of the day, 500 people had died. So I mean, the level of intimacy Manal is having with this, with Israel and Gaza is very, very, very intense and dangerous. And so I just was like, how can I make a film, like show this film about actresses, trauma, all the things it's about when this is going on too. I need a way to metabolize it. I need a way to speak to it. But I find that formal structures and limitations is a very, very effective way to expand one's thinking, as opposed to, I need that kind of limitation. And Manal and I both didn't want to make some kind of, PSA or, straightforward protest video. We wanted to speak very deeply about it. And somehow I just had this bridge. And once it came out of my head, despite the kind of logistical insanity of it, we couldn't walk it back. And what was very complex about making it is that with Maria Schneider's interview, what she's saying, part of why it's so meaningful is because of time, because the whole point is that it just keeps repeating. Her experience keeps repeating. Whereas in writing this with Manal is brilliant, and I could have like a 300-page transcription of our conversations, but we needed to find a way we wanted to stay true to the original interview, but also have a lot of depth and dimension while it seeming relatively casual. And I just was like, wow, I hadn't written a screenplay for about 5 years. And I was like, wow, I am back in this. This is not easy. But Manal was just an incredible partner and collaborator. And we just distilled these, hours and hours of recording to get to what you see.
Well, and I know, I also was hoping that I could have a chance to talk with you about that, what's happening with that excess of material. But I also know that we're at the time when we should be opening this up to questions besides my own. I have a whole raft of them. But Chloe, do we have a question to bring forward besides all of my selfish questions?
Why don't you ask one more, Jill, and I'll remind the audience that you can submit your questions in the form in the chat. We have a couple, but we're still gathering in the background.
Okay, great.
So I think this is a good moment for me to remind you all to post your questions. And the Rail team is also writing ours down, and we'll be ready in a few minutes.
And Jill, I'll just say what you're seeing here is the installation at the Bell Gallery at Brown University, that I think it's clear is a different installation. It has the same sound design, but a different presentation. And I won't say more because I think that let's leave room for your and other people's questions.
But as long as it's here, let's also take a moment to talk about we emphasized listening and really wanted to set up this conversation as its own listening session. But listening, as we've been talking about it, is not the same as hearing. It's a physical, embodied response. It's a being open to what you may not hear with your ears. It might be what you feel with your eyes, and that sense of porosity as a generous form of not necessarily empathy in the sense of taking over somebody else's experience, but a real being open with. And I think you do something with reflection that is also about enhancing our capacity for that kind of attention to what may be difficult to catch because it's not being directly stated or articulated. And so maybe you could tell us a little bit of how the smoky cafe mirror is working here relative to the other ways of doing reflective surfaces at participants, so we get more of an apparitional sense.
Yes, I was interested in the first pass. I was really interested in something that I think I figured out another way to do at participant at well is this sense of almost like monoliths, almost like Stonehenge, these very solid, weighted, close-ups essentially of women. If we could go back to the first of these two slides or just back one slide. Thank you. That really, I didn't want any kind of scrim or light material. I wanted really them to feel weighted down. They're 8 by 10, so they're larger than us. And as you know, it's almost like on the back, you have these 2 by 2, literally a ton of glass, of mirrored glass that's been hand desilvered. They're bistro glass frames that match the size of the frames in the cafe set that we built for shooting the film. And they've been desilvered or distressed to varying degrees on the back. So there's this kind of feeling of on the back of each of the first two actresses is the next actress, which was a way I wanted to play again with both sandwiching experience and sandwiching history, in the sense that history is moving both in time from front to back, and also there's another layer of time with these reflections. And we put a return on them so that you kind of felt held in the space. It kind of feels like a cafe. It kind of feels like flats in a set, which is revealed at the end of the film. And but also you can't look at the reflections without being implicated in them because you're standing in front of them. And behind Isabel, it's just clear glass with one light above, which is very uncomfortable to be listening to the Maria speak while looking at yourself and hearing these experiences. For participant, I also wanted reflections, but I was interested in another, more of a kind of haunty feeling of something that you can see and that you can't see. It depends where you're standing to even be able to see those reflections. And I also wanted them to be obscure. It has a very different, more ghostly, are they there, are they not there effect, which I really love in participant space.
Well, I wanted to thank you so much for also giving us a real sense of how the formal and technical aspects of the installation are training that kind of capacity to attend, but also doing so by creating this intimate implication. And speaking of intimate implication, we're all together in this Zoom room, and I understand that we have queued up some questions from the audience. I want to let you all know that we're going to close with the last clip from the new film produced with participant and with the crucial support of Via Gangitano that you can see if you're in New York. But those of you not able to go to the exhibition, the run of which has been extended, you will have a chance to experience the end of Manal, Issa 2024 at the very conclusion of our NSE today. So Chloe, I know you have some questions queued up from the audience.
I do. Thank you for giving us a minute to queue them all up. First of all, before I launch into this, thank you, Jill and Elizabeth, for this incredibly luminous dialogue today, which has been such a pleasure to listen to. The first question is going to be from Amanda. Amanda is wondering, Elizabeth, if you can speak about your concept of the space between the new film that faces MS-83, the space occupied by viewers. What does she think or feel happens there?
One of the first things that Manal says is that as opposed to being impressed or moved by, you know, Anna Magnani or Tilda Swinton, she was impressed by the real. And what I feel is going on in the new piece is that Manal is really reckoning with her lived experience, and to have Manal, Issa, who's playing Maria Schneider, having her own voice and her own experience facing her performance as someone else is a really kind of extraordinary fusion. And to me, in ways that I'm really finding out as I live in the space, this keeps, I guess, even in earlier films of mine, like A Woman Apart, which is a fiction film about an actress, about this question of like, what is real in a self? When are we performing? When are we ourselves? Like, what does that even mean to be oneself? You know, Manal is also, bringing a lot of herself to her performance of Maria. She says that she, despite their vastly different life experiences, that Maria is kind of a point of light for her when she's struggled with the film industry herself. So this kind of facing each other to me seems really important, and also that both of them had profound courage in the way they resisted their exploitation in the film industry. Manal is making a choice to be poor. That was exactly the same situation with Maria by refusing so many roles. And there's also, this question of erasure, of Manal not being on set, and I feel like it kind of continues this inhabiting of space of people who are not there, and presence, how presence is conveyed in other ways. I'm not a hoarder, but I find objects imbued very easily with memories and histories, and everything on the table is a vessel. They're all holding things, including the smoke, which, tobacco as ritual is seen as like bringing one's prayers to God. And in a way, the smoke is the only thing besides the street that's moving. And it kind of feels like Manal, for me, I'm just talking about my experience of the film. Manal is kind of moving through the space. So again, like what can you actually capture of a person? There are people who have seen the 3-channel piece who knew Maria, who says that Isabel feels the most true to Manal. Other people who respond to parts of Aissa's and say, I remember that from Maria, who's somebody I did not get to meet. So, Amanda, I'll just say those are the kind of things that I've been experiencing watching them back to back. Of course, before I did it, because I don't have a 2,000 square foot studio, I did not know exactly what would happen, but I've been happy by what seems to be unfolding.
Thank you for that incredibly generous answer, Elizabeth. And that is a great segue to Min's question. We have 3 more questions. The next is from Min.
Hi, Jill and Elizabeth. Thank you so much for a wonderful conversation. I wanted to ask about the different iterations that you have for different sort of installations. You have used reflective surfaces. At Participant Ink, there's a sense of privacy too, like the blurring. And then there are other um, instances where you've used mirrors where people are implicated. And I wonder what your sort of thinking process is with different installations, and how the sort of presence that you just mentioned is implicated and thought through the movements of the audience member. So as they move around these different the three channels, how does that inform your ideas around presence and embodiment? How does that influence your practice as a filmmaker?
I think in the broadest, perhaps that's a question about the difference for me between like the black box and the white cube, in a sense, like moving between film and video. And it's been kind of a problem in my career because swinging between the two makes me harder to place. And I'm kind of revisiting each one as like a new person in whether it's the gallery space or the, film world. For me, they just offer such different opportunities to communicate, and I would love to stay in one. Like, okay, just keep making films, or Elizabeth, you just made an installation, make another. But I really have to follow what my instinct is, and what I'm feeling is the way to convey ideas in terms of like conceptually or literally what you're asking. I don't know what to say other they feel different. And I like the feelings of both. I think in one, there is this feeling of surprise. So like, I think I'm just going to the back of the screen and I'm going to watch Isabel, but yet there's this kind of ghost behind me. Whereas with the glass mirrors, it's more like, oh, I am here too, watching them. And so I can't really watch the reflection without me being here too. And what is my role in this kind of cross-historical legacy of trauma and abuse? And what's my responsibility? So I don't mean that this is a politically mobilizing practice, but I think it's hopefully a space for us to feel more deeply experience. And that's the best I can do with that.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Min. The next question is from an anonymous audience member, Elizabeth. They have asked if you can talk about why you felt it was important to use multiple actors and multiple voices to represent Maria.
Yeah, Jill described that with a real, quoted me being more elegant than I'll be able to be right now. But for so many reasons, how can I be efficient about this? I have made experimental biographies for many, many years and tried many different ways to kind of carve out what I think is missing from the official record or the non-existent record of a complex subject. And I did not feel I don't think that I would be upholding Maria Schneider is really an avatar for me. Like, in fact, all of them are. It's not simply that I think she's interesting. It's what she represents, what her experience and the representations, the residue of her can communicate about the world. And when we read a moment, a historical moment, we are coming to it. This is, you know, we're coming to it with our own experience. We're never looking at someone's experience purely. This is the most obvious thing in the world. But I didn't know how to convey what felt important about Maria's interview without bringing other experiences into the mix. So that's why I wanted the kind of resonance of Maria's experience, not to just be me saying, look, here she is, look, this is important, but literally to take other actresses who are actually all directors as well, who are politicized, who have their own experiences in the industry and in their own bodies to carry on this sadly continuation of exploitation.
Thank you for that
I
answer.
was I was wondering if I could just I you've elsewhere talked about this way of being able to then see ourselves as a collective, and I am thinking about the rhetorical act of uh, politically sometimes saying I am fill in the blank as a way of saying I've had that experience too, not saying that I'm exactly the same, but I am Maria Schneider.
Allied.
So this kind of elision helps to produce a particular kind of collective and insisting that I have had similar experiences, and yet that question that you asked each of the actresses carefully chosen that you have this very profound relationship with, to what is the minimum that you could change to insert what's also happened to you. And so then we get a strong articulation of the racism in the industry, and also a calling out very clearly of the let's call it rape that Maria Schneider may be gesturing to, if we're listening to what's unarticulated but isn't directly stated. And so I was wondering if you're thinking at all about the rhetorical act of what is a political movement, where we might say, I am, or I am like someone else, in order to be emboldened to be able to call out our own experiences of various forms of violence.
Well, I think allegiances and shared similarities as a political act and a rhetorical act is really critical. But I think what I was trying to do in this is to make sure that we were actually expanding rather than paralleling experience and carrying, almost like a snowball, we're adding layers and layers of experience on top of a shared one. So rather than reducing it kind of like a Me Too thing or Me Too 2.0 thing, we're supporting experience, and we're articulating dimensionality in it, which is really, I think is a very clear missive right now, is that coalitions are going to have to be built around profound differences. And that the kind of bashing of any digressions of the party line is, we're never going to get anywhere with that. And that doesn't mean to genericize. I am not Issa Mega. I am not Isabel Sandoval, but I want that experience. I want that knowledge. I want that challenge to be part of my responsibility when I'm talking about experience and representation, and to have a space and a platform to lead with varying experience. So as opposed to like we're all in it together, more like we are coming from really different places. We are gathered because of this experience, but it's actually not just this experience.
Exactly. I just really wanted that possibility of coalition through radical difference to emerge.
Thank
So
you.
thank you.
Yes.
The last question today is going to be from me. And just coming off of what you just said, I felt when watching the film, I felt that there was a lot that it highlighted in the slippages between the actresses about Maria Schneider herself in the position of actress in Last Tango in Paris, and about what an actor brings to a scene, and the vulnerabilities and personal experiences that are innate, that slip through the cracks of any performance, and sort of further instilled like a sense of what that breach of trust must have been like. But my question is about language, because I feel like reenactment has such an interesting relationship to translation, and you use subtitles in the film. And I wonder how it went working with language relative to this project, and how that factored into your process.
Yeah, it was a really, thank you for that question, because it's something I'm really obsessed with and so grateful for the other layer. One of my early research assistants for what had planned to be a feature experimental biopic about Maria that was kind of pivoted because of the pandemic is Daniela Schreier, who started the journal Another Gaze. Danny is also a translator. She translated Chantal Akerman's memoir brilliantly. And um, realizing and learning about her process as a translator, and in our wars over the subtitles, and the discovering the intense subjectivity of subtitling, and even we the type of subtitles or subtitling practice or translation practice really shifts from the three. Manal is really speaking from a very classical translation, or the subtitles are. Issa's translation is much more contemporary, and then Isabel's is not like a Google Translate, but it is a very literal translate where there are words that she's saying and phrases that would never be said like that in English. And so that play of subjectivities and interpretation is really interesting to me. And the same with Manal, where she's having to condense this exquisite, much vaster Arabic language into and reduce it to the English language to speak. And I find there is such an elegance in like a third language that comes out in speaking in a second, or in Manal's case, third language, where the way she would phrase things, when she says in all of my parts, she's talking about all of the parts of herself.
Mm.
And we probably would not say in all of my parts, we'd probably say all the parts of myself, or da da da. Also then ricochets and talks about performance, etc. And I would often say to her, okay, I love the way you say this. It means more to me than if we do like a traditional translation. So I'll tell you what that is, and I'm going to beg you to let us keep it this way. And so there's always it really feels like third languages speaking in translation. And also it's a little bit of an attention to Maria, who I think is understood through her speaking in English. And in looking at all this material of her in archives, language affected her, it affected her performance. And we take that for granted. So I could go on, but I know we don't have that much time. I think if it's okay, before we show this last clip, I'd just like to say one more thing about kind of the haunting of Maria, and the way we can both be kind of dismissive of the value of actresses or performers. I would say right now in France, with both the trial of Giselle Pellico and also Adèle Haenel, there was also a screening planned through a Brando retrospective at the Cinémathèque Française, which is where I did a lot of research and read the shooting script, the real shooting script of Last Tango in Paris, and confirmed for myself what Maria always said, that Bertolucci desired, which is it was not in the script. But anyway, the directors of the Cinémathèque Française would not back down on showing Last Tango in Paris with context. So feminists who were protesting it were saying, show it but like I kept getting tagged, and so I had to figure out like show it with Maria Schneider, with Elisabeth's project, show it with a panel, and instead they just didn't. And now there's been leaked internal conversations with some of these well-known actresses that were trying to, I mean, sorry, activists who were trying to negotiate with the Cinematheque. And there is the possible chance that Maria Schneider will be taking down one of the most, you know, esteemed institutions of French cinema or of cinema in France. So it does keep coming back. And with that note, we can flip back to Manal and show the ending of the film. And I would just like to say, by showing you early on and the end, I do hope that people come see the whole piece. And I also wanted to say, on the 26th, Ariana Rines and I will be in conversation at the gallery after gallery hours. Both of us, in her book, Way of a Blood, her new book, and in this work, we were in conversation during the last 14 months, both struggling with how, as Jewish Americans, to deal from afar with this. And so I think it should be it'll be a very meaningful conversation, at least to me. So thank you all for being here, and thank you again,
Thank you
Jill.
Oh, no, thank you, Elisabeth. I mean, one of the many, many, many reasons I especially wanted to have this conversation was that there is a sense in this highly condensed film, Manal Issa 2024, that you've produced for this installation at Participant, that there is so much that's larger than the condensed conversation. And as we'll see in this last clip, it gives us, I think, a sense of a potential ongoingness that feels like its own kind of lifeline. And I know that this question of what it means to be doing politically now, what it means to produce solidarities that mean something, that do something, that the decision not to act and not to appear until there's ceasefire and we could think about other forms of refusal reverberating across the installation, that I really wanted to talk with you about what it means to work with repetition in ways that make it possible for history not to only repeat itself, that there are ways to shift the frame, to walk away, to film and use film, but to use it as a way to make a space for what can still refuse capture, what can resist, what can say no, what can, in saying no, hold on to modes of meaningful solidarity, and solidarity not in the abstract sense, but with a free Palestine.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Jill and Elisabeth, for today. And with that, I'm going to share this film to close us out, and then we'll.
Thank you all so much, and thank you, Chloe, and thank you again, Elisabeth.
Thank you so much. This was a pleasure.
When I was little, I never imagined I would become an actress. I imagined a lot of things. Then I studied engineering. I became an actress. But I'm still looking for what I want. I still don't know. Wait, did you hear that? You heard it? Yeah, that's gonna be a second one. Yeah, it's a sonic boom. Sound of bombing to make people scared. I know, but I just didn't feel like it. You know, already before October 7, I had a lot of doubts. the more films I was doing, I was less satisfied. I wasn't happy. And now I don't trust the industry and their politics. The masks fell off. Separated for what? For films? It's just films at the end, that's all. If I'm on screen, I'm something, and if I'm not, I'm nothing. خلاص. And I acted in a lot of films, and I could have acted all this year. And every time it's very hard for everyone to understand my decision. I can't even speak about it because I feel punished for my positions. And how can you separate something that's in you? I left my country because of politics. I was born into politics. I was shaped into politics. And the life is politics at the end. I prefer to be poor, but spend my time looking for the truth, right, but not be a puppet for the capitalist to drive the eyes away from what is really going on. If I can't be true to myself, there is no point in showing myself.
Thank you so much, Jill. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you as well to Leah and the team from Participant Inc. for their support in preparing for this program today. I'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art, who sponsor the New Social Environment program and make weekday conversations like this one possible. And if you're free tomorrow at 1 p.m., join us for a conversation with Carmen Amengual, hosted by Gabby Collins Fernandez on the occasion of a non-coincidental mirror at Smack Mellon. And as is real tradition, you all can now turn on your microphones and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you again to Jill and to Elizabeth.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Elizabeth, and all.
Thank you,
Thank you so
guys.
much. It's great.
Thank you so much.
It was
Bye-bye.